Snow lashed the empty streets of Anchorage like 1,000 frozen whispers, and in the middle of that merciless storm stood a silent sentinel, chained, forgotten, and barely breathing. A German Shepherd canine, once a warrior on the battlefield, now trembled alone beneath a street sign, his fur buried under ice, his strength fading with every passing second. He didn't bark, he didn't cry, he couldn't. The war had stolen his hearing, and the world had abandoned him. Then, through the blinding snow, a lone figure emerged. Marcus Hale, a retired U.S. Marine, haunted by the ghosts of a battle he never truly left behind. As he locked eyes with the dying canine, something shifted. In that fragile, silent gaze, Marcus saw not just a dog, but a fellow soldier left behind. And in that moment, rescuing the canine wasn't just an act of compassion, it was a fight for redemption. But who would chain a decorated war dog in the freezing dark? And what hidden truth connects this broken Marine to the silent canine he's about to save? If this story moves your heart, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share. And tell us in the comments, do you believe no hero, human or canine, should ever be left behind? Anchorage, Alaska was a city sculpted by ice, wind, and endurance. In winter, the world here seemed to exist in shades of white and steel blue, where the silence of snow could feel both peaceful and oppressive. On this particular night, however, there was nothing peaceful about it. A violent blizzard tore through the city, rattling windows, swallowing streets, and erasing the boundary between sky and ground. Streetlights flickered like distant beacons in a frozen void, their glow quickly devoured by swirling snow. Marcus Hale drove through the storm with deliberate caution, his pickup truck inching along the barely visible road. At 38 years old, Marcus was a man shaped by discipline and hardship. He stood tall at over 6 feet, with a solid, muscular build that spoke of years in the U.S. Marine Corps. His dark brown hair was cut short, streaked subtly with gray at the temples. A faint scar ran along his jawline, a permanent reminder of a mission gone wrong. His steel blue eyes, sharp yet distant, carried the weight of memories he could never fully escape. Marcus lived alone on the outskirts of Anchorage, in a modest, weather-beaten house near the docks. He worked the night shift as a maintenance technician at the shipping port, a job that required precision, reliability, and very little conversation. That suited him just fine. Since leaving the Marines, Marcus had withdrawn from the world. He avoided social gatherings, ignored friendly gestures from coworkers, and kept his interactions brief and functional. Sleep offered no refuge. It brought only recurring nightmares, flashes of fire, the thunder of explosions, and the suffocating silence that followed. Years ago, during a combat mission overseas, Marcus had been the sole survivor of a devastating explosion that claimed the lives of his closest teammates. The guilt of surviving when they did not had carved a permanent hollow in his soul. He carried it quietly, like a shadow that never left his side. As he drove home after a long shift, the storm intensified. Snow lashed against the windshield in relentless waves, and the wipers struggled to keep up. The world beyond the headlights was a chaotic blur of white. Then, at a deserted intersection on the edge of the city, something unusual caught his eye. A dark, unmoving shape near a roadside signpost. Marcus slowed, his instincts sharpening. He leaned forward, squinting through the storm. At first, he assumed it was a pile of debris or a discarded object trapped in the snow. But as the truck crept closer and the headlights steadied, the shape resolved into something unmistakable. It was a dog. Marcus pulled over immediately. The tires crunched over packed ice as the truck came to a stop. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped out into the storm. The wind struck him like a physical force, stealing his breath and biting through his heavy coat. Snow swirled violently around him as he made his way toward the motionless figure. As he approached, his chest tightened. A German Shepherd lay chained to the metal signpost. The dog was large, clearly once strong and well-trained, but now painfully thin. Its black and tan fur was crusted with ice, clumped together by snow and frost. Snow had piled around its legs and belly, nearly burying it. The chain around its neck was thick and rusted, attached to a heavy collar that looked tactical in design. The dog's body trembled faintly, its strength nearly gone. Marcus knelt beside the animal, his movements slow and careful. "Hey there, buddy," he said softly, his voice calm and reassuring. There was no reaction. The dog's eyes were half closed, its breathing shallow and labored. Marcus waved a gloved hand gently in front of its face. The dog's eyes shifted slightly, focusing on him with a quiet, exhausted awareness. But it didn't flinch at his voice or the howling wind. Marcus frowned. He snapped his fingers near the dog's ear. Nothing. A heavy realization settled over him. "You can't hear me," he murmured. The dog's eyes, deep brown, weary but intelligent, held his gaze. There was no fear, no aggression, only fatigue, and a quiet resilience that Marcus recognized instantly. He brushed away the ice from the dog's collar and found a worn metal tag. The engraving was faded, but still legible under the beam of his flashlight. K9 Unit. Marcus's breath caught. A flood of memories surged through him. Patrols under harsh skies, the steady presence of military working dogs moving with precision beside their handlers, the unspoken trust between soldier and canine. These dogs were not just animals. They were warriors, trained to detect danger, protect lives, and face threats without hesitation. And now, one of them had been left to die in the cold. The sight struck Marcus with unexpected force. In an instant, he was no longer standing in a snow-covered street in Alaska. He was back on that battlefield. Dust in the air, chaos all around, the deafening roar of an explosion tearing through the night. He remembered shouting for his team, crawling through smoke and debris, his ears ringing, his heart pounding. He remembered reaching for a hand that never moved again. And then, the silence, thick, suffocating, and final. Marcus blinked, forcing himself back to the present. The storm roared around him, but all he could focus on was the fragile life before him. Not this time, he whispered, his voice trembling with resolve. I won't leave you behind. He examined the chain securing the dog. It was tightly wound around the signpost and locked with a heavy, weathered padlock. Marcus hurried back to his truck and retrieved a compact bolt cutter from his toolbox. Returning to the dog's side, he positioned the jaws of the cutter around the chain. The metal resisted at first, groaning under pressure. Marcus tightened his grip, muscles straining against the cold and the stubborn steel. With a final surge of force, the chains snapped with a sharp crack. The sound rang out, but the dog did not react. The confirmation of its deafness weighed heavily on Marcus's heart. Gently, he removed the remaining length of chain from the dog's collar. You're free now, he said softly, even though he knew the dog couldn't hear him. Marcus slid his arms carefully beneath the dog's body. The German Shepherd was heavier than he expected, yet far too light for a dog of its size. As he lifted it, the dog let out a faint, weary breath and rested its head against Marcus's chest. The warmth of its fragile body seeped through his coat, grounding him in the moment. For a brief, profound instant, the storm seemed to fade. Marcus felt a familiar but long-forgotten sensation stir within him, a sense of purpose, of responsibility, of connection. You're not alone anymore, he murmured. He carried the dog back to the truck, each step deliberate and protective. Carefully, he laid the animal across the back seat and wrapped it in a thick emergency blanket. The dog's eyes remained open, watching him with quiet trust, its breathing shallow but steady. Marcus climbed back into the driver's seat, his hands trembling slightly as he turned on the engine. Warm air began to fill the cabin, melting the frost on the windows. He glanced in the rearview mirror, meeting the dog's gaze. For the first time in years, the silence inside Marcus's mind felt different. It was no longer filled with echoes of loss and regret, but with a clear, steady resolve. He shifted the truck into gear and pulled back onto the snow-covered road, leaving the lonely signpost behind as it disappeared into the blizzard. Marcus wasn't just driving home. He was carrying a fellow soldier out of the storm and taking the first step toward saving a part of himself he thought was lost forever. The storm had not yet loosened its grip on Anchorage when Marcus Hale pulled his truck into the dimly lit parking lot of an all-night veterinary clinic. Snow clung stubbornly to the windshield and hood, while the neon sign reading Brooks Veterinary Care, 24 hours, flickered against the swirling white darkness. The clinic stood like a sanctuary amid the storm, warm, steady, and unwavering. Inside the truck, the rescued German Shepherd lay wrapped in blankets, its breathing shallow but stable. Marcus glanced back, his expression softening. The dog's eyes were open, quietly alert despite exhaustion. There was a calm resilience in that gaze, something Marcus recognized all too well. Hang on, buddy, Marcus murmured. You made it this far. He stepped out, bracing against the cold, and carefully lifted the dog into his arms. The automatic doors slid open with a soft hum, releasing a wave of warmth and the faint scent of antiseptic and clean linens. Behind the reception desk stood a woman in her early 40s, typing on a computer. She looked up immediately, her expression shifting from routine focus to urgent concern. Dr. Evelyn Brooks was a woman of quiet strength and sharp intelligence. She was of average height, with a lean, practical build, her chestnut brown hair tied neatly into a low bun. Thin-framed glasses rested on her nose, framing warm hazel eyes that carried both compassion and professional precision. Years earlier, she had served as a contracted veterinarian for military working dogs, an experience that shaped her calm demeanor and deep respect for canine units. That chapter of her life had left her with a firm belief: Every military dog deserved dignity, care, and recognition. "Oh my goodness," she said, stepping quickly around the desk. "Bring him here, right away." Marcus followed her into the examination room, gently placing the dog on a padded metal table. Evelyn moved with practiced efficiency, her voice soothing as she examined the animal. "It's okay, sweetheart," she said softly, her tone instinctively calm. "You're safe now." She checked the dog's pulse, lifted its eyelids, and listened to its chest with a stethoscope. Her brow furrowed slightly. "He's severely dehydrated and malnourished," she said. "Body temperature is low but not critical. He's lucky you found him when you did." Marcus nodded, his arms folded tightly across his chest. He didn't react to sound, not my voice, not the chain snapping. Evelyn paused, studying the dog's ears and head carefully. She ran a gentle hand along the base of the skull and behind the ears, feeling for trauma. "That's consistent with what I'm seeing," she said. "There's likely permanent hearing loss, most probably from blast exposure. I've seen this before in military working dogs." Marcus's jaw tightened. "He's a canine. I saw the tag." Evelyn gently cleaned the frost from the dog's collar and revealed a worn but intact military-style identification plate. She nodded solemnly. "Yes, definitely a military working dog." She scanned the dog for a microchip using a handheld device. After a brief moment, the scanner emitted a soft beep. "Got it," she said, turning to the computer terminal. The screen flickered as she accessed the National Registry database. Marcus watched silently, the hum of the heater and the quiet beeping of medical equipment filling the room. After a few moments, Evelyn's expression shifted from professional focus to puzzled concern. "That's strange," she murmured. "What is it?" Marcus asked. "The microchip confirms he's a retired military working dog," she explained. "Designation: German Shepherd, male, approximately 6 years old. Status: decommissioned." She paused, scrolling further. "But there's no record of adoption, transfer, or retirement placement. The file just stops." Marcus frowned. "Stops? What does that mean?" "It means there's a gap," Evelyn said, turning to face him. "Normally, once a canine is retired, there's documentation showing whether the dog was adopted by a handler, transferred to a civilian program, or placed through a military adoption initiative. In this case, the record is incomplete. No final assignment, no closure." Marcus glanced at the dog, who lay still but alert, watching them closely. "So he just disappeared on paper," Marcus said quietly. Evelyn nodded. "Yes, and unfortunately, that's not unheard of." She began administering warm fluids through an IV while continuing to explain. After military service, especially when private contractors are involved in logistics and transport, administrative errors can happen. Some dogs fall through the cracks during transitions between units, contractors, and adoption programs. It's rare, but it happens. Marcus's expression darkened. "You're telling me a trained military dog can just vanish in the system?" Evelyn met his gaze steadily. "I'm telling you that sometimes bureaucracy fails the very heroes it's meant to honor." The words hung heavily in the air. Marcus exhaled slowly, the weight of the revelation settling deep within him. He looked at the dog again, at the worn fur, the silent endurance, the unwavering gaze. "He deserves a name," Marcus said quietly, "not just a designation." Evelyn offered a gentle smile. "Have one in mind?" Marcus hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Valor. That's what I'll call him." Evelyn repeated it softly, as if testing its meaning in the room. "Valor. It suits him." As the fluids began to take effect, Valor's breathing grew steadier. His eyes remained fixed on Marcus, tracking his movements with quiet intensity. There was a silent understanding forming between them, one forged not by sound, but by presence and trust. While Evelyn continued treatment, a veterinary assistant entered the room. His name was Caleb Turner, a tall, slender man in his late 20s with sandy blonde hair and a gentle demeanor. Caleb had grown up in a military family, moving from base to base, which gave him a natural respect for service members, both human and canine. His easygoing nature and soft-spoken voice made him especially good with anxious animals. He paused upon seeing Valor. "Wow, he's a canine, isn't he?" Caleb said quietly. Evelyn nodded, retired, and lost in the system. Caleb's expression softened. That shouldn't happen to any of them. Marcus gave a slight nod of appreciation. It was rare for him to feel understood by strangers, but here, in this quiet room, surrounded by people who respected the silent warrior on the table, he felt a subtle shift in his guarded heart. Evelyn finished securing the IV and covered Valor with a heated blanket. He'll need rest, nutrition, and time. But he's strong. Dogs like him don't give up easily. Marcus rested a hand gently on Valor's shoulder. The dog's tail gave the faintest movement, a small but meaningful sign of connection. "Neither do Marines," Marcus said softly. Evelyn smiled. "Then it seems he found the right person." Marcus stood there in silence, the storm still raging outside, but the room filled with warmth and quiet purpose. For the first time since the night of the explosion that changed his life, he felt something shift inside him, not just responsibility, but a sense of mission reborn. Valor was no longer a forgotten file in a broken system. He was a warrior, and now he had someone who refused to let him be forgotten again. The morning after the storm, Anchorage awakened beneath a pale winter sun that shimmered across endless blankets of snow. The city looked calm, almost serene, as if the fury of the previous night had never existed. But inside Marcus Hale's modest home near the docks, a quiet transformation had begun. One not marked by noise or spectacle, but by subtle shifts in trust, patience, and healing. Valor lay on a thick padded mat in the living room, positioned near a space heater that hummed softly. The German Shepherd's coat, once stiff with ice and neglect, had been cleaned and brushed, revealing a rich blend of black and tan fur. Though still lean from malnourishment, his posture had improved. His ears, though unresponsive to sound, remained alert in their own way, tracking movement, light, and presence. Marcus moved slowly around the room, mindful of every gesture. He had rearranged his home to make it safer and more comfortable for Valor, removing clutter, laying down rugs to prevent slipping, and setting up a feeding station within clear visual range. The house, once cold and utilitarian, now carried a quiet warmth. Marcus himself appeared subtly changed. Still tall and solidly built, with his close-cropped hair and weathered features, he moved with a newfound deliberateness. The haunted tension in his eyes had softened, replaced by focused attentiveness. For the first time in years, his routine was not dictated by avoidance, but by care. He approached Valor slowly, holding a bowl of warm, nutrient-rich food recommended by Dr. Evelyn Brooks. Before placing it down, Marcus gently waved his hand within Valor's line of sight, ensuring the dog noticed him. Valor's eyes followed the movement immediately. Marcus lowered the bowl, then tapped the floor twice with his fingers, a signal he had begun to associate with mealtime. Valor hesitated at first, his body tense. His past experiences had taught him caution. But after a brief pause, he stepped forward and began to eat, glancing up occasionally to maintain visual contact with Marcus. "Good boy," Marcus said instinctively, then caught himself. Instead, he offered a small nod and a relaxed posture, body language replacing words. Over the following days, Marcus immersed himself in learning how to communicate with a deaf dog. He researched hand signals used in specialized canine training and adapted them to fit his own natural movements. A raised palm meant stop. 2 fingers pointing downward meant sit. A sweeping motion toward his chest meant come. At first, Valor responded inconsistently. Sometimes he obeyed. Other times, he froze or withdrew, unsure of Marcus's intentions. Yet Marcus never raised his voice or showed frustration. His training as a Marine had taught him discipline, patience, and the importance of consistency, qualities now redirected toward healing rather than survival. One afternoon, as pale sunlight filtered through the frosted windows, Marcus stood a few feet away from Valor and gave the hand signal for sit. Valor tilted his head slightly, studying Marcus's posture and expression. After a brief moment, he lowered himself into a seated position. Marcus's chest tightened with quiet emotion. He didn't cheer or make sudden movements. Instead, he offered a slow, deliberate thumbs up and a gentle nod, clear, calm approval. Valor's tail gave a tentative wag. It was a small victory, but to Marcus, it felt monumental. Meanwhile, at Brooks Veterinary Care, Dr. Evelyn Brooks checked in regularly by phone and occasional visits. During one visit, she arrived at Marcus's home carrying a small medical kit and a warm, reassuring smile. Dressed in a practical wool coat and boots dusted with snow, she moved through the space with professional ease. "I can already see the difference," she said, observing Valor's improved posture and alertness. "He's gaining strength and confidence." Marcus nodded. "He's learning fast. Smarter than most recruits I trained." Evelyn chuckled softly. "Military working dogs often are. They're trained to read body language, movement, and subtle cues. In a way, Valor is simply returning to a language he already knows." As she examined Valor, gently checking his weight and reflexes, Evelyn spoke more softly. "There's something else I wanted to mention, Marcus." He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "What is it?" "There's a veterans support group that meets twice a week not far from here," she said. "It's a small, respectful circle, mostly former service members dealing with trauma, loss, and reintegration. I think it could be helpful for you. Marcus's expression hardened slightly. I'm not much for group therapy. I understand, Evelyn replied calmly. But healing doesn't always happen alone. Sometimes, being in a room with people who understand without explanation can make a difference. Marcus looked down at Valor, who was calmly watching the exchange, his eyes moving between them. I'll think about it, Marcus said, his tone neutral but not dismissive. Evelyn nodded, recognizing the significance of that small concession. That's all I ask. Later that week, Marcus began incorporating short outdoor walks into Valor's routine. The streets of Anchorage were quieter now, the storm having passed, leaving behind towering snowbanks and crisp, clear air. Marcus kept Valor on a sturdy leash, using gentle taps and hand signals to guide him. During one walk, they encountered a neighbor Marcus had rarely spoken to before, Mrs. Lillian Carter, an elderly woman in her 70s who lived 2 houses down. She was petite, with silver hair tucked neatly under a knitted hat, and she leaned lightly on a cane. Despite her frail appearance, her eyes sparkled with warmth and curiosity. Years earlier, she had lost her husband, a Korean War veteran, and had since developed a quiet affinity for those who had served. Well, hello there, she said, smiling as Marcus and Valor approached. That's a handsome dog you've got. Marcus nodded politely. His name's Valor. Mrs. Carter's expression softened. A strong name. He looks like a brave soul. Valor stood calmly at Marcus's side, watching her movements attentively. When she slowly extended a gloved hand, Marcus gave a subtle hand signal for stay. Valor obeyed, maintaining a composed posture. He's very well trained, she observed. He's teaching me as much as I'm teaching him, Marcus replied quietly. As the days passed, Marcus noticed changes not only in Valor, but in himself. His nightmares became less frequent. His sleep, though still restless, carried fewer violent awakenings. The routines of feeding, training, and walking Valor provided structure and purpose, something he hadn't felt since leaving the Marines. One evening, Marcus sat on the floor across from Valor, practicing a new signal for come. He tapped his chest and extended his hand. Valor hesitated briefly, then walked toward him with steady confidence. When Valor reached him, Marcus placed a gentle hand on the dog's shoulder. There was no need for words. The connection between them was clear, built on trust, consistency, and mutual understanding. In that quiet living room, illuminated by the soft glow of a floor lamp and the silent fall of snow outside, Marcus realized something profound. Communication was not defined by sound. It was defined by presence, intention, and empathy. Valor had lost his hearing in service. Marcus had lost parts of himself in war. Yet together, they were discovering a new way to understand the world and each other. As the night deepened, Marcus sat back against the couch, watching Valor rest peacefully. His thoughts drifted to Evelyn's suggestion about the Veterans Support Group. For the first time, the idea didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a possibility. He wasn't ready yet, but he was no longer closed off to the idea. The language of silence had begun to heal them both. Winter settled deeply over Anchorage, wrapping the city in a quiet, reflective stillness. The sky stretched in pale gray layers, and the snow, now undisturbed, shimmered under soft daylight. Inside Marcus Hale's home, the atmosphere was calm, but charged with an unspoken tension, like the stillness before a storm that rose not from the sky, but from memory. Valor had grown stronger. His once fragile frame was filling out with healthy muscle, and his movements carried the disciplined confidence of a trained canine. His coat gleamed with renewed vitality, and though his ears remained unresponsive to sound, his awareness of visual cues had sharpened remarkably. He followed Marcus closely, responding to hand signals with precision and calm focus. That morning, Marcus stood by the kitchen table, studying a printed document Dr. Evelyn Brooks had sent him the night before. The paper bore the header of a nonprofit organization, United K-9 Veterans Alliance, a group dedicated to locating, supporting, and honoring retired military working dogs. Evelyn had called Marcus earlier that week, her voice measured but serious. I reached out to a contact of mine, she had said. They specialize in tracking missing or undocumented military working dogs. They might have more information about Valor. Now, as Marcus read through the preliminary report, his heart began to pound. A few hours later, Marcus arrived at the Anchorage office of the United K-9 Veterans Alliance. The building was modest but well kept, with framed photographs of military handlers and their K-9 partners lining the walls. Each image told a silent story of loyalty, courage, and sacrifice. He was greeted by Daniel Reyes, the organization's regional coordinator. Daniel was a man in his mid-40s, tall and lean, with a composed posture that hinted at a disciplined past. His dark hair was peppered with gray, and a neatly trimmed beard framed a thoughtful, steady expression. A former Army logistics officer, Daniel had spent years witnessing the bureaucratic complexities of military operations. After leaving the service, he dedicated his life to ensuring that military working dogs received the recognition and care they deserved. His calm demeanor and methodical nature made him both trustworthy and reassuring. "Marcus Hale?" Daniel asked, extending a firm hand. "That's me," Marcus replied, returning the handshake. "And this must be Valor," Daniel said, kneeling slightly to observe the German shepherd. Valor stood quietly beside Marcus, alert and composed. Daniel offered a slow, respectful nod rather than reaching out, instinctively understanding the importance of trust with working dogs. "He carries himself like a seasoned operator," Daniel remarked. "He is," Marcus said quietly, "even if the system forgot." Daniel gestured toward a conference room. "Let's take a look at what we've uncovered." Inside, a large monitor displayed a digital dossier. Daniel navigated through the files with practiced precision. "We were able to trace Valor's microchip through archived military contractor records," he explained. "He served in a specialized detection unit deployed to a high-risk operational zone overseas about 3 years ago." Marcus's jaw tightened. "What location?" Daniel hesitated briefly, then brought up a map. A red marker blinked over a region Marcus knew all too well, the same rugged terrain where his Marine unit had been deployed during his final mission. "That's not possible," Marcus murmured, his voice low. Daniel looked at him carefully. "You recognize the area?" Marcus nodded slowly, memories surfacing with vivid clarity. "My unit operated there. We were hit by an IED during a reconnaissance patrol. Massive blast. We lost almost everyone." Daniel clicked to the incident report. According to these records, Valor was part of a K-9 unit assigned to assist in explosive detection operations in that same sector. During one mission, an improvised explosive device detonated unexpectedly. The report states that the dog sustained significant auditory trauma due to the blast. Marcus stared at the screen, his pulse echoing in his ears. The date of the incident matched the exact day etched into his memory, the day that had divided his life into before and after. "He was there," Marcus whispered. "He went through the same explosion." Daniel nodded solemnly. "It appears so. After the incident, Valor was medically evaluated and classified as permanently hearing impaired. He was deemed unfit for further active duty and marked for retirement. But somewhere between medical discharge and civilian placement, the administrative trail ends." The room fell silent. Marcus felt a surge of emotion, shock, grief, and a rising anger that burned deep within his chest. "So he survived the blast, served his duty, and then got lost in paperwork?" he said, his voice tightening. "Left to be forgotten?" Daniel's expression remained steady but empathetic. "Unfortunately, cases like this, while rare, do happen, especially when multiple contractors and agencies are involved. But what matters now is that he was found, and he's with someone who understands what he's been through." Marcus looked down at Valor, who stood calmly at his side, eyes steady and unwavering. In that moment, Marcus no longer saw just a rescued dog. He saw a fellow survivor, one who had endured the same chaos, the same violence, and the same aftermath of silence. The revelation struck him with profound force. For years, Marcus had believed that the weight of that explosion belonged to him alone. Now, he realized that Valor had carried that invisible burden as well, without recognition, without closure. On the drive home, Marcus's thoughts churned. The city passed by in a blur of snow-covered streets and muted winter light. Valor sat upright in the back seat, calm and composed, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. Back at home, Marcus removed his coat and sat heavily on the couch. Valor approached and gently rested his head on Marcus's knee. The simple gesture broke through the storm of emotions within him. "I thought I was the only one who came back from that day," Marcus said quietly, his hand resting on Valor's head. "But you were there too. You survived it, just like me." A wave of anger surged through him. Anger at the system that had allowed a decorated military working dog to be forgotten. He stood abruptly and paced the room, fists clenched. "You deserved better," he said, his voice trembling. "You all did, every single one of you." Yet beneath the anger, another emotion began to surface: understanding. Valor bore no resentment, no bitterness, only quiet resilience and unwavering loyalty. Marcus stopped pacing and looked at the dog, who watched him with calm, trusting eyes. "You're not angry," Marcus said softly. "You just kept going." That realization shifted something within him. The rage that had threatened to consume him began to soften, replaced by a deeper resolve, not just to seek justice, but to honor valor's strength by choosing healing over hatred. Later that evening, Marcus sat at the kitchen table. The report from the United K-9 Veterans Alliance spread before him. The truth was no longer buried. Valor's story had been uncovered, one of courage, sacrifice, and unjust neglect. But now, that story had a new chapter. Marcus reached down and gave the hand signal for come. Valor responded immediately, walking to his side with quiet confidence. Marcus placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "We're going to make sure your story is remembered," Marcus said. "Not just as a survivor, but as a hero." Valor's tail moved gently, a silent acknowledgement. In the stillness of that winter night, Marcus understood a powerful truth. War did not only leave scars on human souls, it marked every life that stepped onto the battlefield, two-legged or four. And healing, he realized, was not about erasing the past, but about honoring it with courage and compassion. The buried truth had been revealed, and with it came a new purpose, one rooted not in anger, but in remembrance, dignity, and the quiet strength of moving forward. Spring arrived in Anchorage not with fanfare, but with quiet persistence. The heavy snowbanks slowly receded, revealing patches of dark earth and stubborn blades of grass pushing through the thaw. The air carried a crisp freshness, and with it came a sense of renewal, subtle, steady, and deeply felt. Inside Marcus Hale's home, that same quiet transformation had taken root. Months had passed since the day Marcus uncovered the truth about Valor's past. The revelation had shaken him, but it also gave him direction. Now, each morning began with purpose. Marcus rose early, brewed a simple cup of black coffee, and prepared for Valor's training sessions, rituals that had become the backbone of his healing. Valor had changed remarkably. The once fragile, wary dog now moved with strength and confidence. His black and tan coat gleamed under the soft morning light, and his muscular frame reflected months of proper care and exercise. Though deaf, his eyes were sharp and expressive, constantly scanning Marcus for cues. At nearly 6 years old, Valor carried the discipline of a seasoned military working dog and the gentle loyalty of a devoted companion. Marcus stood in the backyard, now cleared of snow and dotted with early spring blooms. He raised his hand in a clear, deliberate motion, 2 fingers pointed downward. Valor immediately lowered into a perfect sit. Marcus then swept his arm outward in a smooth arc. Valor pivoted and lay down, his gaze fixed attentively on Marcus's face. A rare smile touched Marcus's lips. "You've got it, partner," he murmured, instinctively speaking even though Valor could not hear. The words were less for the dog and more for himself, a quiet affirmation of progress, patience, and trust. Their bond had evolved into something profound. Without spoken commands, they communicated through movement, eye contact, and subtle shifts in posture. It was a language forged through shared trauma and mutual resilience. One afternoon, Marcus prepared to attend something that once felt impossible, a veterans support group meeting. He wore a simple flannel shirt, dark jeans, and a weathered jacket, practical and unassuming. Valor walked beside him, harness secured, posture calm and confident. The meeting was held at a local community center, a modest brick building surrounded by budding trees. Inside, the atmosphere was warm and welcoming. Folding chairs formed a circle, and a coffee station in the corner emitted the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Among the attendees was Caleb Turner, a man in his late 30s with a tall, lean build and a slightly stooped posture that hinted at old injuries. His sandy blonde hair was cut short, and a faint scar traced along his jawline. Caleb had once been an Army combat medic, known for his calm under pressure and unwavering dedication to saving lives. However, after losing several fellow soldiers in a devastating ambush, he carried a quiet weight of survivor's guilt. Despite this, Caleb's natural empathy made him approachable. He often offered gentle humor and attentive listening to others in the group. As Marcus entered with Valor, conversations paused briefly, not in discomfort, but in curiosity and admiration. "Is that a service dog?" someone asked. Marcus nodded. "His name is Valor. He's a retired military working dog." Caleb's eyes lit up with recognition and respect. "Then he's one of us," he said warmly, gesturing for Marcus to take a seat beside him. The group facilitator, a middle-aged woman named Laura Mitchell, welcomed Marcus with a kind smile. Laura had a calm, grounded presence, with soft brown eyes and a steady voice that carried both compassion and strength. A former military counselor, she had dedicated her career to helping veterans navigate the emotional aftermath of service. "We're glad you're here, Marcus," Laura said gently. "Take your time. Share only what you're comfortable with." At first, Marcus remained quiet, listening as others spoke about their struggles, nightmares, anxiety, strained relationships, and the long road back to normalcy. Each story resonated with him, echoing emotions he had buried for years. Valor lay quietly at Marcus's feet, his body relaxed but attentive. Occasionally, he would lift his head and rest it lightly against Marcus's leg, a grounding presence that anchored him in the moment. When it was Marcus's turn, the room fell into a supportive silence. He cleared his throat, his hands clasped tightly. "My name is Marcus. I served in the Marines." He paused, the familiar weight of memory pressing against his chest. Then he glanced down at Valor, who looked up at him with steady, trusting eyes. "This is Valor," Marcus continued. "He was deployed in the same region as my unit. We survived the same explosion. I didn't know that until recently." A murmur of understanding rippled through the group. "I spent years trying to forget that day," Marcus said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "But finding Valor, it forced me to face it. And I realized something. He went through the same hell, lost his hearing, and still came back loyal, calm, and ready to trust again. If he can keep going, so can I." Caleb nodded, his expression deeply empathetic. "Sometimes healing doesn't come from forgetting," he said softly. "It comes from remembering together." Marcus exhaled, a tension he had carried for years finally easing. For the first time, sharing his story didn't feel like reopening a wound. It felt like letting light into a long-sealed room. After the meeting, several members approached Marcus, offering words of encouragement and gratitude. Valor received gentle pats and admiring smiles, his calm demeanor winning hearts effortlessly. From that day forward, Marcus attended the support group regularly. Each session peeled away layers of isolation, replacing them with connection, understanding, and acceptance. Valor became a beloved presence in the group, a silent ambassador of resilience. His steady gaze and composed posture often brought comfort to those struggling to find calm. Beyond the meetings, Marcus found new purpose. Inspired by Valor's story and the work of the United K-9 Veterans Alliance, he began volunteering with local organizations that supported retired military and service dogs. He helped build training routines for adopted K-9s, assisted new handlers in understanding nonverbal communication, and shared his experiences with fellow veterans. One notable afternoon, Marcus met a young rescue dog named Luna at a local training facility. Luna was a 2-year-old mixed breed with a sandy coat, oversized ears, and an energetic, playful personality. Though not a military dog, she had been rescued from neglect and was initially fearful of sudden movements. Under Marcus's calm guidance and Valor's reassuring presence, Luna gradually gained confidence, learning to trust human interaction. Watching Valor gently model calm behavior for Luna, Marcus felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Valor was no longer just healing, he was helping others heal too. As summer approached, the once snowy landscape transformed into vibrant greens and blooming wildflowers. Marcus often took Valor on long walks along scenic trails, where the rhythm of their steps and the quiet beauty of nature reinforced the peace they had found. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and lavender, Marcus sat on a wooden bench overlooking a tranquil lake. Valor rested beside him, his head held high, eyes reflecting the fading light. "You gave me a reason to keep moving forward," Marcus said softly, placing a hand on Valor's back. "Not just to survive, but to live." Valor leaned gently into his touch, a silent acknowledgement of their shared journey. The road to recovery had not been quick or easy. It was built on patience, courage, vulnerability, and unwavering loyalty. Together, Marcus and Valor had transformed pain into purpose, isolation into connection, and silence into understanding. They were no longer defined by what they had lost, but by what they had rebuilt. Summer arrived in Anchorage with gentle brilliance, bathing the city in long golden evenings and soft, lingering sunlight. The once muted streets now echoed with quiet vitality, children laughing in nearby parks, the rustle of leaves and warm breezes, and the distant hum of life moving forward. For Marcus Hale and Valor, this season symbolized more than a change in weather. It marked the unfolding of a purpose neither of them had imagined when their paths first crossed in the cold grip of winter. Valor walked confidently beside Marcus as they approached the Veterans Wellness Center, a modern, glass-fronted building nestled among tall spruce trees. The center had recently launched a therapeutic outreach program designed to support veterans coping with trauma, anxiety, and emotional isolation. Marcus and Valor had been invited to participate after their story quietly spread through local veteran networks. Valor, now fully restored in strength and spirit, carried himself with dignified calm. His black and tan coat shone under the sunlight, and his attentive eyes reflected a profound sensitivity to human emotion. Though he could not hear, his ability to read body language and emotional cues had become almost uncanny. At 6 years old, he embodied both the discipline of a trained military working dog and the gentle presence of a healer. Inside the center, the atmosphere was warm and welcoming. Soft lighting, comfortable seating, and walls adorned with photographs of veterans and their journeys created a space of safety and reflection. They were greeted by Dr. Samuel Carter, the program's lead psychologist. Dr. Carter was a man in his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair, kind brown eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses, and a calm, reassuring voice. A former Air Force mental health officer, he had spent years working in high-stress deployment zones, helping service members cope with trauma in real time. His experiences shaped a compassionate and deeply patient approach to therapy. "Marcus, it's an honor to finally meet you," Dr. Carter said, extending a warm handshake. "And Valor, I've heard remarkable things about you." Valor stood poised and calm, acknowledging the greeting with a gentle wag of his tail. "We're grateful to be here," Marcus replied. "If our story can help others, then it's worth sharing." The first session involved a small group of veterans seated in a circle. Some appeared guarded, others weary, and a few quietly hopeful. Among them was a new participant named Jonah Brooks, a broad-shouldered man in his early 40s with a rugged beard and deep-set eyes that carried the weight of unspoken memories. Jonah had served as a combat engineer, specializing in route clearance, an occupation that exposed him repeatedly to the threat of hidden explosives. A roadside blast years earlier had left him physically unharmed, but emotionally fractured. Since then, he struggled with hypervigilance and difficulty trusting his surroundings. As the session began, Dr. Carter introduced Marcus and Valor, briefly sharing their journey of survival, rediscovery, and healing. Jonah watched quietly, his arms crossed tightly across his chest. His gaze lingered on Valor, curiosity slowly replacing skepticism. During a guided exercise, participants were encouraged to focus on grounding techniques, observing their environment, their breathing, and physical sensations. Marcus sat calmly, while Valor lay beside him, his steady presence radiating reassurance. At one point, Jonah's breathing grew shallow, his eyes darting nervously as anxiety began to surface. Without a word, Valor rose slowly and approached him with deliberate gentleness. He stopped at a respectful distance, lowering his head slightly and maintaining soft eye contact. Jonah hesitated, then cautiously extended a hand. Valor leaned forward just enough for Jonah's fingers to rest against his fur. The contact was grounding, tangible, and calming. Jonah's breathing gradually steadied. "I can't hear anything from him," Jonah said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "But somehow, he understands." Marcus nodded. "He listens with his eyes and heart. Sometimes, silence speaks louder than words." From that day forward, Marcus and Valor became regular participants in the program. Valor's calm demeanor and intuitive responses helped veterans feel safe, understood, and less alone. His silent empathy bridged emotional gaps that words often failed to cross. Meanwhile, their story began to gain wider recognition within the veteran and military support communities. The United K-9 Veterans Alliance, alongside several partner organizations, initiated a formal review of Valor's service record. Weeks later, Marcus received an official invitation to a recognition ceremony held at a local military memorial park. The event was organized to honor retired military working dogs, whose contributions had been overlooked or insufficiently acknowledged. The day of the ceremony arrived under a clear blue sky. Flags waved gently in the breeze, and rows of chairs faced a modest stage adorned with military insignias and floral arrangements. Marcus stood proudly beside Valor, who wore a ceremonial harness decorated with a small American flag patch. His posture was composed, embodying the dignity of a true veteran. Among the attendees was Captain Rachel Donovan, a poised and confident woman in her late 30s, with sharp features, auburn hair neatly tied back, and a commanding presence. As a U.S. Army officer specializing in military working dog programs, she had dedicated her career to advocating for the welfare and recognition of K-9 soldiers. Known for her integrity and unwavering commitment, Rachel had played a key role in ensuring Valor's service record was properly reviewed and honored. When she approached Marcus, her expression was both respectful and heartfelt. "Marcus, it's a privilege to stand here today because of what you and Valor represent," she said. "Valor's service has been officially verified. Today, we restore not just his record, but his rightful place in military history." During the ceremony, Valor was formally recognized as an honorably serving military working dog. A commemorative medal was gently placed on his harness, and a certificate of recognition was presented to Marcus. The audience, composed of veterans, families, and community members, rose in a heartfelt standing ovation. Marcus knelt beside Valor, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. Emotion filled his voice as he spoke. "You were never forgotten, not truly. Today, the world sees what I've always known. You are a warrior, a survivor, and a beacon of hope." Valor stood calmly, his eyes reflecting the sunlight and the admiration surrounding him. In the weeks that followed, Marcus and Valor's story continued to inspire. They were invited to community events, schools, and veteran gatherings, where Marcus shared their journey, not as a tale of suffering, but as one of resilience, connection, and redemption. Through it all, Valor remained the same, steady, compassionate, and profoundly present. One evening, after returning from a particularly meaningful session at the wellness center, Marcus and Valor sat on a grassy hill overlooking the city. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow across the landscape. Marcus looked at Valor, his expression peaceful. "We walked through darkness together," he said softly, "and somehow, you led us both into the light." Valor leaned gently against him, a silent affirmation of their shared journey. From the depths of trauma and forgotten service, they had emerged into recognition, purpose, and hope. Their story was no longer defined by loss, but by the light they now carried for others. A full year had passed since the day Marcus Hale found Valor, shivering, wounded, and forgotten in the unforgiving winter of Anchorage. Now, as another winter gently returned, the city was once again draped in white. But this time, the snow no longer symbolized isolation or despair. Instead, it reflected healing, memory, and quiet triumph. The morning sky glowed with a soft, pearlescent light, as snowflakes drifted lazily from above. Marcus stood at the edge of his porch, bundled in a dark wool coat, his breath forming gentle clouds in the cold air. Beside him, Valor stood tall and composed, his thick coat well-groomed and gleaming against the snowy backdrop. At 7 years old, Valor carried the dignified calm of a seasoned veteran and the gentle warmth of a beloved companion. Today was not an ordinary day. Inside the house, a neatly framed document rested on the living room table, the official adoption certificate. After a year of rehabilitation, legal processing, and formal recognition of Valor's service, Marcus had officially become Valor's permanent guardian. Marcus picked up the certificate, his fingers tracing the embossed seal. His expression was calm, yet his eyes held a depth of emotion forged through hardship and healing. "You're home for good, partner," he said softly, placing a hand on Valor's shoulder. Valor responded with a gentle wag of his tail and a steady, trusting gaze. Later that morning, Marcus prepared for a journey that held deep symbolic meaning. He fastened Valor's harness, now adorned with both his honorary service medal and a simple tag engraved with the word home. Together, they set out toward the snow-covered road where their destinies had first intertwined. The path lay just beyond the outskirts of the city, bordered by tall pines heavy with snow. The air was crisp and silent, broken only by the soft crunch of boots and paws against the frozen ground. As Marcus and Valor walked side by side, their footprints formed a parallel trail, two lives once marked by pain, now moving forward in unity. Marcus paused at the very spot where he had first seen Valor a year ago. The memory returned vividly, the biting wind, the fragile figure in the snow, and the moment compassion overcame hesitation. He knelt, brushing away a thin layer of fresh snow from the ground. "This is where everything changed," he murmured. Valor stood close, his posture calm and attentive, as if sensing the significance of the moment. Marcus placed a gloved hand on Valor's chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "You saved me as much as I saved you," Marcus said quietly. While Marcus and Valor honored their shared past, their present was filled with purpose. Over the past year, Marcus had become an active volunteer within the veteran community. He worked closely with support groups, rehabilitation programs, and organizations advocating for the rights and welfare of retired military working dogs. One of his key collaborators was Sergeant Leo Martinez, a retired Army K-9 handler in his early 40s. Leo was broad-shouldered and muscular, with close-cropped black hair and a neatly trimmed mustache. His warm smile and easygoing demeanor made him instantly approachable. Years earlier, Leo had struggled with severe depression after being separated from his own K-9 partner at the end of his service. That experience fueled his passion for ensuring that no handler or working dog would be left without support. His resilience and humor brought lightness to even the heaviest conversations. Leo often joined Marcus and Valor during community outreach events. At one such event, held in a snowy public park, families, veterans, and volunteers gathered to learn about the contributions of military working dogs. Valor calmly interacted with attendees, his gentle presence captivating children and comforting veterans alike. A young girl named Sophie, about 8 years old with rosy cheeks and a bright red scarf, approached Valor with cautious curiosity. Sophie had a quiet, observant nature and had recently lost her grandfather, a Navy veteran. Though initially shy, she found comfort in animals. "Can I pet him?" she asked softly. Marcus nodded, guiding her with gentle instructions on how to approach. Sophie placed a small hand on Valor's back, her face lighting up with a smile. "He feels warm," she said. Leo chuckled kindly. "That's because he's got a hero's heart." Moments like these reinforced Marcus's belief that Valor's legacy extended far beyond their personal story. Together, they were changing perceptions, raising awareness, and building bridges of understanding between generations. As winter deepened, Marcus was invited to speak at a regional veterans conference. Standing before an audience of service members, families, and advocates, he shared the journey that had transformed his life. "I once believed that survival meant carrying pain alone," Marcus said, his voice steady. "But Valor taught me that healing begins when we allow ourselves to trust again, whether that trust comes from a fellow soldier, a community, or a loyal companion who never gave up." Valor lay calmly at the foot of the stage, a silent symbol of resilience and unwavering loyalty. After the conference, Captain Rachel Donovan approached Marcus once more, her expression proud and reflective. "Your advocacy is making a real difference," she said. "Policy discussions are underway to strengthen protections and support systems for retired military working dogs." Valor's story helped spark that momentum. Marcus glanced at Valor, a quiet pride filling his heart. "He's still serving," Marcus replied, "just in a different way." On the anniversary of their meeting, Marcus returned once more to the snow-covered path. The sky was a soft gray, and snow fell gently, blanketing the world in peaceful silence. As Marcus and Valor walked together, their footprints once again traced parallel lines through the snow, steady, enduring, and inseparable. Marcus stopped and looked out over the quiet landscape. The cold no longer felt harsh. It felt cleansing, almost sacred. He knelt beside Valor, wrapping an arm around him in a rare, tender embrace. "In the silence of this snow," Marcus said softly, "our story is written, not in words, but in loyalty, redemption, and hope." Valor leaned into him, his presence warm and grounding. Their journey had begun in darkness, shaped by war, loss, and abandonment. But through patience, courage, and unwavering companionship, they had transformed that pain into purpose. Together, they proved a simple yet profound truth. No one, whether human or a four-legged warrior, deserves to be left behind. As they turned to walk home, the falling snow gently covered their tracks. Yet the impact of their journey remained, etched not in the ground, but in the hearts of all those they had touched. Two warriors, one path, and a legacy of light that would endure far beyond the winter's end. As the final scene fades and the quiet snow gently blankets the path behind them, a deeper truth remains, one that reaches beyond this story and into the hearts of all who have watched. Sometimes, miracles do not arrive with thunder or flashing light. They come softly, in the form of a loyal companion, a second chance, or a moment of unexpected grace. Marcus thought he had lost everything to the darkness of war. But through Valor, he discovered a gift that could only be described as divine timing. When hope seemed buried, God placed a wounded yet faithful soul in his path, proving that even in our lowest moments, we are never truly alone. Valor could not hear a single word, yet he spoke the language of love, loyalty, and healing more clearly than any voice ever could. Together, they remind us that God often works through the quietest miracles, through compassion, connection, and the courage to keep going. No scar is too deep, no heart too broken, and no soul too lost to be touched by grace. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect on the quiet blessings in your own life. Perhaps there is someone, or something, placed in your path for a reason. Please share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you are watching from. Your voice matters, and your story could inspire someone else to keep believing. If this message touched your heart, share this video with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel for more stories of healing, faith, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. May peace fill your heart, may strength guide your journey, and may God bless you and your loved ones with comfort, protection, and unwavering hope. Amen.